Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Breachside Broadcast, home of the finest voxcasting either side of the breach. On today's episode, we continue the madness of Malifaux. War is approaching between the Guild and the Cult of the Burning Man. In order to shore up his forces, Governor General Marlowe has recruited Tull's artillery company, known for their unorthodox strategies and high collateral damage. I hope you enjoy part 6 of Madness of Malifaux, right after this word from our sponsor.
This episode of the Breachside Broadcast is brought to you by Tull's company. If you want something well and truly settled, sometimes you've got to bring out the big guns, and they don't come much bigger than Ethel and Gertrude. Our walking artillery pieces get the final word in any dispute. The company is not responsible for any loss of life or damage to property that may result from bombardment.
Tull whistled tunelessly to himself as he inspected one of Hoffman's massive peacekeepers, stationed next to his battle line. The rest of his troops were busy arranging themselves into position, checking ammunition and sneaking a last-second piss before the battle got started. A large ethervox crackled, while its operator hurriedly cast relays to Dashel and Sonia's units further north. The air stank of exhaust fumes and gunpowder. Wasn't a bad day considering. Light breeze, a little warmer than expected. A few places in the sky looked off-color, like seeing the moon during the day on Earth. Tull hadn't been on this side of the breach long enough to know if that was normal, but it felt creepy as hell. Their position overlooked a portion of the quarantine zone. Years of neglect and low-level banditry had left the neighborhood in disrepair, but there were pockets of proper civilization among the rundown buildings. Block after block of broken streets and dilapidated row houses stretched all the way to the river. The locals seemed to know what to do when the guild came rolling in. Tull hadn't seen hide nor hair of the citizenry since he started setting up his artillery. The thrum of diesel engines came up behind, accompanied by the sound of heavy, steel-clad footsteps. Louisa leaned her half-track, supporting herself as she came to a stop. Braxton flanked the other side, his enormous mechanized suit proudly displaying the king's colors. Tull had tried to get him to repaint the suit into something more neutral, but Braxton would always be the king's man. Tull nodded in their direction. "What do you think? Worston Headingham about the same?" Braxton folded his arms across his armored chest. "Should be a piece of cake either way, eh?" Louisa said, as she tucked an errant curl of hair underneath her scarf. "At least we've got the drop on them this time. Usually those cultist buggers come out of the woodwork." "Assuming the good doctor's numbers are right," Tull answered. He pointed towards a lone tower standing proud in the middle of the zone. "How far do you think it is to that? 800 yards? 850? "About 850, Louisa said. "You want me to go check it out?" "Not now, just trying to get a range. Better if I could send a couple of rounds downfield to close the brackets, but Hoffman didn't like that idea." Tull turned back to his compatriots. His eyes lit up as he saw the figure approaching them. "Speak of the metal devil." Crackling electricity heralded Hoffman's approach. He spoke loudly and clearly, addressing the entire group. "I'd ask all of you to watch where you place covering fire. These constructs can take weeks to repair, and I'd rather not spend time performing unnecessary maintenance." "No problem. Just try to keep those clankers away from where we're going to shoot. Makes it easier for me to keep my end of the bargain, you know." Tull winked, chuckling at his own joke. Hoffman's mouth fell to a rigid line. Before Hoffman could object further, They were interrupted by a ripple in the sky. It looked like fire eating away at flash paper. Hoffman slapped a visor over his eyes and scanned the clouds. This is it. Everyone into position. A wretched, wailing scream broke through the sky. Tendrils of red and blue coalesced into little whirlpools, colors quickly draining as the portals expended their energies to burn through reality. Each one opened with a painful shriek. It always reminded Tull of water splashed onto hot bacon grease. The light changed, and the world changed with it. At the center of the maelstrom was the burning man, his narrow figure contorting and shifting with living flame. He writhed as though in pain or ecstasy. Each spasm punched more holes in the sky, from which dropped foul blobs of melted flesh and arcane magic, all snapping mouths and slime-covered tendrils. They fell on the rusted tin roofs of the zone like meaty hail. Right on bloody time. Tull leapt up onto the walking howitzer. The sound of screeching portals and the shouts of unit leaders dimmed in Tull's mind. Let's give the bastard a poke. Squinting through the optical array, Tull licked his finger and stuck it in the air, then made a couple of adjustments with the windage wheel. Louisa and Braxton hurried for cover, leaving a confused Hoffman staring at the gunner. Is he going to... The report of Tull's gun boomed. A ring of dirt and stone popped underneath the automator's legs as the ground absorbed the heavy recoil. A single shell sailed into the air, arcing high into the madness-touched clouds before dropping down. When it touched the burning man, the metal simply dissolved into nothingness. Blue fire shuddered angrily, and the coruscating figure rose even higher into the skies. What the hell do you think you're doing? Hoffman yelled, his hands belated over his ears. Never works, but I figure it's worth a shot, yeah? Tull said with a shrug. Plus it lets the old bastard know who he's dealing with. Thought he could get away from me, but no sir, I'm right here waiting for him. He twisted around and yelled at the gun's crew. Get her reloaded, lads. We've got the king's work ahead of us. Your orders are to keep the skies clear while we advance, Mr. Tull. Got it, Chief, Tull called back, but his attention was distinctly downrange. Hoffman muttered to himself, then stomped back to his position. Tull waved to the Ethervox transmitter. You heard the man. Get the Rocketeers in the air. Above, the Rocketeers were blurs of motion. They ducked and sped past the mutants coming from the writhing portals, tossing incendiary grenades when they had the chance. Each bomb caused the gateways to writhe and destabilize. A gentle rain of blood and metallic bits fell to the ground, each time a portal was ripped apart by a Rocketeer. Let's go, let's go. My nonna could do this faster than you lot. Louisa smacked her helmet into position, then sped off into the dilapidated slum, leaving the company in a cloud of exhaust. I hope someone gave her some orders, Tull mused as he watched the Cavalier rip between the buildings, the bright redcoats of the guard in her wake. The sound of skeeters filled the air, mixing with the gentle roar of the ocean and the rumbling of Jedro's belly to form a soothing drone. The pair of fishing poles stuck into the sand waved back and forth in a gentle breeze. Zeb took another pull on his jug of shine, then poked Jedro in the arm. Hey Jed, what's the biggest fish you ever caught here? Oh, got a silver pine last year, big as your arm. Ma hooked a spider crab that near took her fingers off, but it got away. Jedro drew a long snot-filled breath in through his nose, then exhaled voluminously. I seen bigger, but they like us not to pull you rather than the other way round. Why you asking? Just wondering, Zeb answered. After a long pause, he poked Jedro again, then pointed out into the wake. Reckon I got you both beat. In the shallow surf, tangled in the thin strands of Zeb's fishing line, struggled a monster. Its bulbous eyes blinked in confusion as it flailed against the line's nearly invisible grasp. The lure, a soda bottle, cleverly painted to look like a giant goldfish, hung over the creature's swollen forehead and bounced sporadically between its eyes. Every time the shiny surface of the lure caught the creature's attention, it would swipe at it, sending the bottle spinning on its line around the monster's neck, tightening the noose. It had scales like shiny pennies, and claws like knives, and the kind of frilly gills that looked like a lady's underthings. "Well, shoo dang, son." Jed hopped to his feet, pushing his crumpled hat back on his forehead and scratching his forehead. "I gotta get me one of them lures." After a moment, Jed's smile faded. He pointed out beyond the struggling fish thing to the deep waters of the Gulf. Or maybe not. Lines of bright flame appeared beneath the surface, boiling the salt water and sending geysers of steam and dead fish into the air. The shallows seethed with furious motion, stirred by chitinous bodies and the grasping fins of larger creatures. The shallows broke open, disgorging humpbacked monsters with rows of teeth and shining bulbous eyes. The creatures rose from the waters and lurched hungrily up the beach. Pyres flickered around an abandoned courtyard in a long-abandoned section of the quarantine zone. The flames gave off a mixture of green and orange light, bathing her in a sickly glow. Riva Cortinas stood in the center of her followers. Living and dead alike stood up straighter when the necromancer looked at them. Riva smiled. "Be not afraid. So long as the flame burns, this place shall be free of darkness and terror. It will be our sanctuary." The roar of their approval was like the heat of a furnace, and Riva basked in its glory. Thick smoke filled the air, and the wreckage of twisted mutants littered the street. Drawn by the Burning Man's incandescent manifestations in the sky, cultists boiled out of the surrounding buildings, their broken bodies warped into incomprehensible horrors of flesh and bone. A contingent of broken creatures, once human but no longer, had pinned the guard down in the center of the zone, while a mass of tentacles and teeth harassed their flanks. Hoffman had sent his legion of automata to try and relieve the guard, keeping a few back to support Tull's advance on the left. "There aren't many of them, but they're all over the damn place," Hoffman said. He and Tull stayed close together to coordinate the efforts of their teams, striding just behind the front line. "And every time we contain one outbreak, another opens elsewhere. It's like they're baiting us forward. Are we sure this isn't a trap?" "Oh, it's definitely a trap," Tull said with a laugh. In the distance, one of Louisa's flares turned the streets magnesium white. Tull sighted his grenade launcher and sent a round downrange, watching the smoky trail arc gracefully onto the marked target. A cloud of burning debris flew into the air. Tull laughed again, then slapped the launcher's cylinder open, let the shells jangle onto the ground at his feet, and started to reload the weapon from his belt. "Nice thing about traps, my boy, is they lead to a target-rich environment. Can't toss a grenade without hitting a cultist." "I prefer my environments considerably less target-rich," Hoffman said. A signal came through his vox, drawing his attention away briefly. "Yes? Well then send the reinforcements. The other reinforcements. Well then make some." He closed the transmission and threw his hands up in disgust. The massive fist of his suit mimicked the motion, clipping the top off a street lamp. "They're moving south. I'm going to have to—" The storefront across from them exploded outwards, and a mob of twisted horrors tumbled out. Tull snapped the launcher shut, but before he could bring it to bear, the horrors swept over him. Hoffman responded quickly, metal fists pummeling mutated flesh, and the short bright arc of his welding torch filled the air with greenish smoke and burning meat. It was a short, sharp fight. Afterward, Tull and Hoffman stood alone in a pile of broken bodies. "That's a hell of a suit," Tull gasped. He put a grenade into the shattered storefront for good measure. "I'll have to get me one of them." "They're not worth the cost," Hoffman answered. "As I was saying, the cultists have broken the southern flank. They need my help. Can you handle this?" "Sure thing. We'll get Gertrude and Ethel up here to provide a covering barrage." On cue, the two lumbering howitzers came around the corner, crushing cobblestones under their steel-shod feet. Nothing like a good kill zone to clear things up. Yes, well, be careful where you aim those things. There are friendlies downrange, Hoffman said. Not a problem, boss. You worry about the cultists. Leave the artillery to me. Tull cupped his hand to his mouth, then yelled down the street. Braxton, get your shiny ass over here. Need some backup. Hoffman shook his head, then turned on his heel and loped towards the collapsed flank. Braxton replaced him at Tull's side. The twin smokestacks on his back sent coils of sparks and thick black smoke into the air. Braxton saluted casually. What do you need, Gaffer? He asked. Take a team of sappers and clear out the surrounding buildings, Tull said. I want to set the girls up on this hill, so we can start the serious work of putting iron on target. Braxton put 2 fingers to his brow before trudging forward. The sappers fell in line behind him. They were armed with guns and explosives that were perfectly suited to the close confines of the quarantine zone's terrain, assuming they threw the explosives far enough away. The team went house to house, popping smoke and tossing grenades to clear the interiors before moving on to the next. They left a line of jagged facades behind them. When they reached the end of the road, Braxton signaled back the all clear. Right, set 'em up, Tull said. The pair of walking howitzers rumbled to the center of the newly formed courtyard and dropped their stabilizers. The crews were still leveling off the firing platforms when Tull's ethervox hissed to life. Corporal Tull, are you all right? It was the Governor General. Tull snatched up the handset. Yeah, Gov, we're all good. What's up? We have reports of extensive explosions in your vicinity. Some sort of counter-battery fire? We thought... No, everything's all clear. Just a bit of creative positioning. What? What do you mean, creative positioning? What are you doing down there, Tull? Listen, mate, you're breaking up. Have to... Tull spat and shook the ethervox, creating a terrible squeal. Get back to you soon. He snapped the machine off. Enough of that. The girls are ready. Aye, boss. One of the members of the crew threw back a sharp salute. Locked and loaded. Let's give Chuck that covering fire he needs. Tull hopped up onto the platform and started fiddling with the sights. We know Hoffman's position. No, sir. We could call him on the crewman gestured at the ethervox that Tull had just turned off. No need for that. I'm sure we can figure it out. Tull scanned the sky. The sky was full of portals, and more were appearing by the second. If he triangulated the largest portals, he should be able to figure out where the cultists were amassing. Tull pulled out a clipboard and grease pencil and started doing the math. There we go. What's right here? He asked, circling a point on the map. The artillerist looked it over, then pointed downrange. Give me a full barrage on that location. We're going to turn the tide of battle, lads. The team went into action, sighting lines and spinning the elevations and windage wheels that moved the howitzers' big guns. When they were roughly lined up, Tull stepped in. The corporal reached up and turned his earpiece off. All went deathly quiet. Everything else dropped away. Peace enveloped chaos. Explosions were just displays of color, vibrant sparks and clouds. Vibrations rumbled through the ground, making Tull's nerves aware of impacts and movement. Silence focused each thought. Tull's breathing slowed. Variables fell into place. Instinct and experience worked together. The gunner locked his target. It was a building underneath the swirling portals, nearly at their epicenter. Silver constructs gleamed below, trapped in the nearby streets by mobs of cultists. Hoffman was somewhere in that mess, pinned down and in need of help. Help's on the way, Chuck, Tull whispered, then locked the howitzer and pulled the firing lanyard. The old lady spoke with clamorous voices, booming in unison. The shockwave from the muzzles flattened several precariously situated homes nearby and sent a cloud of debris into the air. 2 shells arced into the skyline and briefly hung there before crashing down. Plumes of plaster dust shot into the air. Chunks of brick and wood burst into lethal clouds. Tull didn't hear the screeching of tearing metal, the explosive ends of multiple construct engines, or the screams of cultist and steamfitter alike. Ethel unloaded her remaining shells into neighboring structures, one after the other, completely razing the foundations. Deprived of the ritual supporting them, the gateways stuttered. Many snapped shut instantly. Horrors were cauterized as they stepped foot in Malifaux. Clusters of others succumbed to the fires raging inside their bodies, fatty corpses proving the necessary fuel instead of magic. The burning man heaved several times before he floated further northeast. As he passed, Tull threw up 2 fingers in a rude gesture. Gertrude shifted beneath him, and movement caught Tull's attention. A single line of diesel fumes and dust was speeding toward his position. The gunner hopped down from his perch. He put down the grenade launcher, shifting to pull Walter out of his pack. The cat had no qualms about being lifted up trophy-like as Louisa approached. "Lou, you missed the party," Tull shouted, overly loud to compensate for his deafness. The half-track came to a stop, debris both mineral and organic dripping from its tread. Louisa Fusey launched into a tirade before she finished holstering her flare pistol. She got well underway before looking at Tull and Walter. "I've been trying to do your job. Always playing with your toys, Harry. It's too much." "Damage," Tull signed back. "Low casualties, safe retreat. But that Stragona is no joke. Scary woman. Not sure she needed your help, but probably better you did something. The Governor General won't like this, though." Louisa followed Tull into the destruction he caused. Cult forces had mostly scattered, either across the masonry or deeper into the quarantine zone. On the other hand, numerous constructs looked to be in bad shape. Huge dents, broken lenses, sparking limbs. Their controllers hadn't fared much better. Ones further from the blast had thrown up magical shields. Their associates near the first strike weren't so lucky. Tull flipped on his hearing aid, but kept the ethervox off. The threat was gone. He could take 5 minutes and savor the victory. He rubbed the back of his head. Collateral damage was a part of his life. Telling amalgamation office bodies from cultists was nearly impossible, but that didn't make looking at it any easier. "I'm sure we'll hear about this," he said, surveying the damage. Louisa scoffed, sweeping her arm as though showing off a landscape. "We, not me. You're the one who caused this mess." Walter suddenly leapt from Tull's shoulder and sauntered down the ruined street. He meowed, peering at one of the fallen buildings. Tull jogged over, equally curious. He gave out a ringing laugh. "Hey, Chuck, how are you? I knew a big man like you could take a shell or two." Hoffman's suit whined as it pushed off multiple layers of debris. Both hands threw aside chunks of wall and ceiling, as though breaking from an eggshell made from building materials. Electricity snapped and buzzed. It slowly dissipated, as the impromptu shield it formed was no longer needed. Hoffman coughed and wheezed, taking in lungfuls of air. It was almost monochrome with soot and pulverized stone. Louisa hurried over as the engineer clumsily stood, sweating profusely. She helped him to his feet. "Why did you do that?" Hoffman asked, half-conscious. His visor retracted, revealing a shell-shocked expression. Tull dusted off one of the suit's shoulder plates. "They tried to pull a fast one on us. Classic cult tactic back on Earth. Think they're attacking one place, then boom. Portals everywhere else. A baker's dozen when you thought you only ordered one. You let these go and pretty soon you've got a whole town full of Gribblies. I remember in Arbersbach, there was this mess of..." The inventor's mouth opened in disbelief, moving soundlessly before he shrieked, "Are you insane? Look what you've done!" Tull looked around at the ruined constructs and winced. "Ah, yeah, sorry about that. But hey, nothing a few days in the shop can't fix, right?" Anger clicked. Hoffman drew himself up to his full augmented height, easily several feet above the gunner. Bile laced his words. "People are dead because of you. You can't act on whims. We have procedures, protocols." Tull shrugged. "Hey, true, but you're alive because I decided those procedures weren't the best for the situation." Can't have you clocking out before the rest of us. You dropped a building on me, on my employees, Hoffman growled, gritting his teeth. Gotta take risks sometimes, especially when you're fighting the Burning Man. He's chaos incarnate after all, and you can't plan around that. Besides, you're fine. The gunner tapped the side of Hoffman's suit. Old girl's a fine piece of machinery. Weeks, if not months, of around-the-clock work lay strewn out across the ground. The sheer cost of parts alone, not to mention labour, tallied in Hoffman's mind. Marlowe had to be informed. Fault didn't lie with the Amalgamation Office. This will all be in my report to the Governor-General, Hoffman said icily. Tull leaned down, picking up Walter and draping him over his shoulders. I hope so. Now what say we get back to the Enclave and celebrate another victory for Tull and Company? I'm thinking something orangey. Do you have oranges here? He started sauntering away before getting an answer, splitting the conversation between Walter and himself. Louisa saw Hoffman giving her a stunned look. She shrugged. It's a legitimate question. I haven't seen one here. The inventor watched the pair head back through the streets they'd besieged just minutes ago. Steamfitters and metallurgists were still recuperating. Trying to salvage anything fire, friendly or otherwise, hadn't ruined. For all it was worth, Hoffman could only shake his head. If anything, the file on Tull and Company hadn't exaggerated enough. It was a perfect day at the beach. The sun was shining, the kids were running around with their whacking sticks. Ernie had a full jug of shine in one hand and his favourite fishing rod in the other, and the waters were red with blood. The scaly bodies of dead fishermen bobbed in the shallows, surrounded by gremlins with fish knives. So you don't get none of that blood on your good boots, Clydie, Babs yelled. Then she lowered her voice and spoke to her husband. If that boy ruins them boots. Oh, leave him be, they just having fun. Ernie pushed his cap back on his head and scanned the beach. We can always steal some new shoes. Dead men float down the river all the time.
That's it for another episode of the Breachside Broadcast. Join us next time for more Tales of Malifaux.